When I was unloading groceries in the driveway, my cruel mother-in-law, waiting for this moment, rushed at me with her car and hit me. I was pinned under the vehicle, badly injured, and shouting for help. She left me alone. While I was in the hospital, my cruel husband came to me and offered $50,000 to keep quiet about the incident. When the police arrived, I bravely told the truth. What came next, I could never have imagined. My name is Lauren, and for years I thought I had the perfect life, or at least I convinced myself I did. I was 32 when everything changed, but it started long before that. If you had asked me back then, I would have told you I was happy. But now, looking back, I can see I was living in a cage, pretending everything was fine while I was slowly suffocating. I met Ethan when I was 26 at a community event in Aurora, Colorado. He wasn't particularly charming or romantic, but he had this steadiness that I thought I needed. I'd had a rough few years before meeting him, working long hours at a marketing firm and navigating life on my own. Ethan seemed like a safe harbor. He wasn't flashy, but he was dependable, or so I thought. We dated for 2 years, and when he proposed, I said yes, without hesitation. I was swept up in the idea of building a life together, a family, a future. The first cracks began to show right after the wedding. We moved into Ethan's parents' home, which seemed practical at the time. His mother, Victoria, had insisted it would help us save money for our own house. What she didn't say was that it also meant she would have complete control over our lives. Victoria was a retired nurse in her mid-60s, and she had this way of making everything sound like a suggestion when it was really a command. She'd say things like, "Lauren, don't you think it's better if you handle the cooking? Ethan works so hard." Or, "You should be grateful Ethan chose you. He could have married anyone." Her tone was always polite, but her words stung. They made me feel small, like I wasn't good enough. Ethan's father, Harold, was quieter, but no better. He was a retired contractor who spent most of his time watching TV or tinkering in the garage. Harold never outright insulted me, but he didn't have to. He'd nod along with Victoria's outdated comments about a woman's place being in the home, and his silence spoke volumes. Ethan, my husband, the man I thought would stand by me, did nothing. Whenever I tried to talk to him about how his parents made me feel, he'd dismiss it with a wave of his hand. "They're old-fashioned," he'd say. "Don't take it personally." I started to feel trapped. I had given up my job to focus on our new life, thinking it was what a good wife should do. But with each passing day, I lost a little more of myself. Victoria dictated everything: how I should clean, what I should cook, even how I should dress when we had guests over. Harold backed her up, and Ethan? He just went along with it all. I felt like an outsider in my own marriage, like I was constantly walking on eggshells, trying to meet expectations I didn't even agree with. The years passed, and the dreams Ethan and I had talked about, buying our own home, starting a family, began to fade. Ethan seemed uninterested in anything that didn't involve his parents. Whenever Victoria or Harold made comments about grandchildren, Ethan would shrug and change the subject, leaving me to fend off their remarks alone. I felt abandoned, like I was carrying the weight of our relationship by myself. Then came the day everything shattered. It was a crisp morning in late spring. I was unloading groceries from the trunk of my car, trying to organize everything before heading inside. That's when I heard the engine. At first, I thought it was just someone pulling into the driveway. But then I looked up and saw Victoria's car speeding toward me. I froze. For a split second, I thought she wouldn't, but she did. The impact knocked me to the ground, pinning me under the car. The pain was immediate and overwhelming. I could barely breathe, let alone move. Victoria didn't get out to help. She didn't even stop. Instead, she panicked, reversed the car, and sped off. I was left lying there, groceries scattered around me, gasping for air and trying to make sense of what had just happened. I don't remember much of what happened next, only that a neighbor must have seen me and called for help. The next thing I knew, I was in the hospital, surrounded by bright lights and the sound of beeping machines. My body ached all over, and my mind was racing. Why had Victoria done this? Was it an accident or something more? I wanted answers, but they wouldn't come. Then Ethan arrived, and for a moment, I thought I'd have some comfort. I thought he'd hold my hand, tell me everything was going to be okay. Instead, he sat down next to me, his face pale, and said something I'll never forget. "Lauren," he began, his voice low and urgent. "Mom's scared." She panicked. "You can't tell the police she hit you. Just say you fell. We'll give you $50,000 to cover whatever you need, okay? Just don't make this a big deal." I stared at him, my heart sinking. My husband, the man I had trusted, was trying to buy my silence. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. He wasn't there to support me or to stand by me. He was there to protect his mother, to sweep everything under the rug like it didn't matter. Like I didn't matter. That was the moment something inside me broke. All the years of silence, of swallowing my pain, of pretending everything was fine, they all came rushing back. I looked at Ethan, and I realized I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't lie for them. I couldn't protect people who had never protected me. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to stay silent. That's where it all began, the fight for my life, for my truth. And let me tell you, it wasn't easy. But for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: determination. I wasn't just Lauren, the quiet, submissive wife anymore. I was Lauren, the woman who was ready to fight back. I lay there in that hospital bed, Ethan's words echoing in my mind. "Don't make this a big deal." His tone was casual, but his meaning wasn't. He wanted me to lie, to protect his mother, to protect the image of their perfect family. And that $50,000 he dangled in front of me like a carrot? It wasn't kindness. It was a bribe, a price tag on my silence.
I didn't say anything to him then.
I couldn't. My throat felt dry, my mind racing with anger and betrayal. He left soon after, his face tense, saying he'd come back later to talk things through. But I already knew what he'd say. Ethan would try to twist the situation, make it sound like I was being unreasonable. After he left, the room felt eerily quiet. I stared at the ceiling, trying to process everything. Victoria's actions, Ethan's betrayal, all the years I had endured their control and mistreatment. It was like a dam had broken. For years, I'd convinced myself that things weren't that bad. But now, lying there with my body bruised and aching, I couldn't deny it anymore.
They didn't care about me.
Not Victoria. Not Harold. And not even Ethan, the man who had vowed to love and protect me. Then something unexpected happened. A doctor came in to check on me. He introduced himself as Dr. Michael Carter, and he must have seen the look on my face because he paused, pulling up a chair next to my bed. "Lauren," he said gently, "you look like you have a lot on your mind. Do you want to talk about it?" I don't know why I opened up to him, but I did. Maybe it was the kindness in his voice, or the way he genuinely seemed to care. I told him everything. How Victoria had hit me, how Ethan wanted me to lie, how trapped I had felt in my marriage. By the time I finished, tears were streaming down my face. Dr. Carter didn't interrupt, didn't judge. He just listened. When I was done, he said something I'll never forget. "Lauren, I know this feels overwhelming right now, but you don't have to face it alone. What happened to you isn't just wrong, it's a crime. And you have every right to stand up for yourself." His words hit me like a bolt of lightning. For the first time, I felt like someone was on my side. Someone saw me, really saw me, and didn't think I was overreacting. Dr. Carter encouraged me to speak to the police, to tell them the truth about what had happened. He even offered to connect me with a counselor who could help me process everything. That night, I couldn't sleep. My body hurt, but it was nothing compared to the ache in my heart. I kept replaying the accident in my mind, the way Victoria had sped off like I was nothing, like I didn't even matter. And Ethan's betrayal, his willingness to lie, to cover up what his mother had done, cut deeper than any physical wound. I knew I had to make a decision. Stay silent and let them get away with it, or fight back and risk losing everything I thought I had. The next morning, I made my choice. When the police officer came to take my statement, I told him everything. I told him how Victoria had hit me while I was unloading groceries, how she had driven off without stopping, and how Ethan had tried to bribe me into lying. The officer, Detective James Rollins, listened carefully, taking notes. He asked me questions about the details of the accident, and for the first time, I felt a sense of control. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was taking action. Later that day, my neighbor, Rachel, came to visit me. Rachel and I weren't particularly close before this, but she had always been kind. When she heard what happened, she was furious on my behalf. "Lauren," she said, "I have security cameras that face the driveway. I might have footage of what happened." My heart raced at her words. Could it be true? Could there really be evidence that proved Victoria hit me on purpose? Rachel didn't waste any time. She and her husband reviewed the footage and found exactly what we needed. The video showed Victoria's car speeding toward me, the impact, and her quick escape. When Rachel showed it to me, I felt a mix of emotions, relief, anger, and a renewed sense of determination. I handed the footage over to Detective Rollins, who assured me it would be crucial in building the case against Victoria. But the fight was far from over. A few days later, Ethan came back to the hospital. His demeanor was different this time, less confident, more desperate. "Lauren, you have to think about what you're doing," he said, pacing the room. "If this goes to court, it'll ruin my mom's life. Do you really want to destroy this family's?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Even after everything, Ethan still didn't see me as a person worth fighting for. I looked him straight in the eye and said, "Your mother tried to kill me, Ethan. And instead of supporting me, you tried to cover it up. This family destroyed itself the moment you chose her over me." He didn't have a response. He just stood there, stunned, before storming out of the room. I knew then that my marriage was over.
There was no coming back from this.
Dr. Carter checked on me regularly, offering not just medical care, but emotional support. He reminded me that I was stronger than I thought, that I had the right to fight for justice. With his encouragement, I began to see a way forward, a life where I wasn't under Victoria's thumb, where I wasn't silenced by Ethan's indifference. The case against Victoria was building, and the video footage was damning. But I knew this wasn't just about her. This was about me reclaiming my life, my voice. For the first time in years, I felt a spark of hope. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I was ready to take the first step. The weeks that followed were some of the hardest in my life. Every day, I was reminded of what had happened, not just the accident, but the years of control, manipulation, and betrayal that had led to it. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't willing to hide. I was done pretending everything was fine. I was done protecting people who didn't care about me. I was ready to fight. Detective Rollins kept me updated on the investigation. The video footage from Rachel's security cameras was crucial. It showed everything: Victoria's car speeding toward me, the impact, and her driving off without even slowing down. When I watched it, I felt sick to my stomach, but I also felt vindicated. There was no denying the truth anymore. Not for Victoria, not for Ethan, not for anyone. The police brought Victoria, Harold, and Ethan in for questioning. Victoria tried to act surprised, as if she had no idea why she was there. "It was an accident," she insisted, her voice trembling. "I didn't mean to hurt her." But the video didn't lie. It showed her reckless actions for what they were. She couldn't explain it away. Harold sat silently, as he always did, refusing to look anyone in the eye. And Ethan tried to justify everything. "I was trying to protect my family," he said, his voice cracking. "I didn't want this to get out of control." As if I was the one blowing things out of proportion. As if he wasn't complicit in covering up a crime. When I confronted them during questioning, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Anger, of course. Anger that they had hurt me, betrayed me, dismissed me. But there was also sadness, a deep ache for what could have been. I had loved Ethan. I had believed in him. But now, standing in front of him, I realized I didn't even recognize the man I had married. "Do you have any idea what you've done to me?" I asked him, my voice steady but firm. "Your mother could have killed me, Ethan. And instead of standing by me, you chose to protect her. You tried to bribe me. You tried to silence me. How can you call that love?" Ethan didn't answer. He just looked down at the floor, his shoulders slumped. For a moment, I thought I saw regret in his eyes. But it didn't matter anymore. Regret wouldn't change what he'd done. Regret wouldn't undo the pain he'd caused. The charges came quickly after that. Victoria was arrested for attempted murder and fleeing the scene of a crime. Ethan was charged as an accessory, and Harold faced charges for obstruction of justice. When the news broke, the entire town was in shock. People who had once respected the family were outraged. Victoria's name, once associated with charity events and social clubs, became a symbol of betrayal and cruelty. Ethan, who had always seemed so steady and dependable, was exposed as a coward. Through it all, I leaned on the people who truly cared about me. Rachel and her husband were a constant source of support, offering me a safe space to recover and rebuild. And then there was Dr. Carter. Michael, as he asked me to call him, became more than just my doctor. He became a friend, someone I could trust, someone who reminded me of my own strength when I felt like giving up. "Lauren," he said one day after a particularly emotional meeting with the police, "you've been through hell, but you've handled it with more grace and courage than most people ever could. Don't let them take away your sense of who you are. You're stronger than you think." Those words stayed with me. They became a mantra, a reminder that I wasn't just a victim. I was a survivor. As the legal proceedings began, I made another decision. I filed for divorce. There was no saving my marriage, not after everything that had happened. Ethan's betrayal wasn't just about the accident. It was about years of dismissing my feelings, of siding with his parents, of leaving me to fend for myself. I couldn't live like that anymore. I didn't want to. The divorce was messy, but I didn't care. I wasn't fighting for money or property. I was fighting for my freedom. And when the papers were finally signed, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. But even as I started to move forward, the trial loomed in the distance. I knew it wouldn't be easy to face Victoria, Harold, and Ethan in court. I knew they would try to twist the story, to paint me as overdramatic or vindictive. But I also knew I had the truth on my side, and I was ready to fight for it. Looking back, I think that was the moment I truly began to heal, not when I decided to fight, but when I realized I could. When I realized I had the strength to stand up for myself, to demand justice, to reclaim my life. It wasn't just about the accident anymore. It was about everything they had taken from me, and everything I was determined to take back. The day of the trial arrived faster than I expected. I walked into the courtroom with my heart pounding, but my head held high. This was it, the moment I'd been waiting for, the moment I would finally face the people who had hurt me and demand justice. Victoria, Harold, and Ethan sat at the defendant's table, their faces a mix of defiance and fear. They avoided my eyes, but I didn't care. I wasn't there to look for remorse. I was there to speak my truth. The prosecution laid everything bare. The video footage from Rachel's security camera, the medical reports, and my testimony about Ethan's attempts to bribe me into silence. Every detail painted a clear picture of what had happened that day and the years of manipulation I had endured. When the footage of Victoria hitting me was played in court, the room fell silent. The sound of the impact, my body hitting the ground, and Victoria's car speeding away, it was undeniable. Victoria tried to maintain her usual air of control, but it cracked under the weight of the evidence. She claimed it was a mistake, that she hadn't seen me. But the footage showed otherwise, and her words rang hollow. Harold, as always, stayed silent, his guilt written all over his face. Ethan tried to justify his actions, saying he was trying to protect his family, but his excuses fell flat. The truth was laid bare for everyone to see. When it was my turn to speak, I stood before the courtroom and told my story. I didn't hold back. I spoke about the accident, yes, but also about the years of emotional abuse and neglect I had endured. I spoke about the weight of living under Victoria's control, Harold's complicit silence, and Ethan's constant betrayal. "This isn't just about what happened that day," I said, my voice steady despite the tears threatening to fall. "This is about a pattern of cruelty and disregard. It's about a family that chose to protect themselves at the expense of my safety, my dignity, and my life." When the verdict was announced, I felt the wave of relief wash over me. Victoria was found guilty of attempted murder and fleeing the scene of a crime. Harold was convicted of obstruction of justice, and Ethan was found guilty as an accessory. Victoria received a lengthy prison sentence, Harold was placed under house arrest, and Ethan was sentenced to 3 years in prison. They had tried to control me, to silence me, but in the end, the truth won. After the trial, I began to rebuild my life in earnest. The divorce had been finalized, and I moved into a small but cozy apartment, my first real home in years. Rachel and her husband became like family to me, their support unwavering. And then there was Michael, Dr. Carter, the man who had been there for me in my darkest moments, became an even more significant part of my life. What started as friendship grew into something deeper. Michael was kind, patient, and understanding in ways I had never known. He didn't try to fix me or rush my healing. He simply stood by me, reminding me that I was capable of standing on my own. A year after the trial, we married in a small, intimate ceremony surrounded by people who truly cared about us. It wasn't a grand affair, but it was perfect because it was filled with love and hope. Now, as I sit here telling my story, I feel like a different person. The Lauren who walked into Ethan's life all those years ago is gone. In her place is someone stronger, someone who knows her worth, someone who refuses to settle for less than she deserves. I still think about Victoria, Harold, and Ethan sometimes, not with anger, but with a sense of closure. They made their choices, and now they're living with the consequences. As for me, I'm living my life, free from their control, surrounded by love and support. I've learned that betrayal doesn't define you. What defines you is how you rise after you've been knocked down. This is my new beginning, and I couldn't be more grateful for it.